On paper, horizontal wells are pretty standard, but are there certain points in the well path where experienced drillers maybe slow down a little bit so nothing goes sideways, or are there riskier moments, in the drilling?
Yeah, there's always parts of every well that are maybe what I'd say more challenging than others, and like kind of the theme here is that it just varies by basin, varies by area. If you're drilling out in the Texas Panhandle, the brown dolomite is always a problem. It's very shallow, tons of losses, extremely corrosive. Chlorides are going to go through the roof. Like there's all different kinds of challenges there.
Hmm.
Anytime that you're running casing
Okay.
is also a very important part of the well. But really, one of the challenges with drilling is that it can kind of go sideways at any time, and so it's just really important that at any moment your guys are completely hooked up. Everybody's watching. When you're on the rig, you've got tons of alarms set: flow alarms, gain loss alarms, pressure alarms, all these different things. So I wouldn't say at any given point in the well that you're like, oh hey, let's slow down here, let's take this easy. But I would say that it is absolutely critical that you're constantly watching what's going on. You're taking that data that you're getting from downhole, and that if something does start going sideways on you, that at that point you do slow down. Because there's kind of a saying that's like, hey, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Whenever those things start stacking up against you, the next decision that you make is extremely critical, because you can kind of just bury yourself at that point. And so you've just got to start stacking right decisions to kind of get back on the right side of things, and to start making headway again. I would say that there's no place in a well where everybody just says, hey, calm down here, let's take this slow, let's slow down operations. But I would say that it's extremely critical that you let the well talk to you, and that you interpret that right and make right decisions whenever things aren't going as planned.
I'm sure there's guys that, during the drilling phase that are probably been around it longer and can they almost have like a sixth sense about what's going on, or, they hear something that, I think there's got to be guys that are more experienced on it, I'd imagine.
Yeah, experience is a great teacher. Whenever you're like, if you're drilling a well in Oklahoma, all the guys who I started working with, who got in the oil field in the 70s or so, and were out here whenever it was just a complete boom. I mean, they'll always talk about the Morrow, and the Morrow is a shallow. Well, it's not necessarily a shallow zone. Depends on where you're at, but it's very permeable. It had tons of gas in it back in the day, and they knew that whenever they drilled into it, that they were going to see a big show. Now, the interesting thing is that it was a real challenge, because the Morrow on one side of the street would be this huge show. You know what I mean? So like gas is coming at you. You're either shutting the well in, you're increasing your mud weight, you're doing all those things. But on the other side of the road, it could be absolutely nothing. And so you never really knew what you were going to get. That's one of the challenges that we face right now, is that Morrow is still giving us problems, because if you go in and you hit a untapped or virgin little spot of pressure, like you could be 2 or 3 pounds underbalanced drilling through it. Whereas literally we'll move a well 100 feet on the same pad, we'll nudge in a different direction, and you go on a vacuum, because now you're in a depleted area of the Morrow. And so those are the spots where I would say, one, everybody needs to be on high alert. You need to be talking to all the guys and be saying, hey, we could see this or we could see that, but we need to be looking to, watching very closely to kind of see what our next steps need to be. And if you do get a big gas kick, shut it in. That kind of hits the pause button. Let's do our calculations. Let's spend the time to figure out exactly what we need to do next. So, as much as horizontal wells, a lot of times you can kind of say it's, copy and paste, or we've done it so often that it seems kind of standard. There's always things that will come up, and can bite you. And I would also say, I'm probably gonna make a lot of people mad here, but Oklahoma, I think, is more variable than most. I think there are certain basins or certain areas where maybe it's a lot more cut and dry and more consistent across the board. But Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle, and those are some of the places that you're always going to have surprises pop up.
Okay.